Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today I've got a paragraph from the ship's 1984 command history that talks about the modifications that were made to the ship at that time. Why were there major modifications being made to the ship in 1984 though? She's reactivated ahead of schedule and under budget in 1982. New Jersey was very much pushed through her reactivation in the 1980s by John Lehman and Ronald Reagan so that she would be ready ahead of schedule and under budget so that Congress would authorize the funding to reactivate the other Iowa-class battleships. What that means for New Jersey is that a lot of the work that would have normally been done during that large overhaul period she underwent in 1982 was deferred until later. The idea being that she would go out on Shakedown, she would have proved to Congress and the world that it was a worthwhile investment, and the money would be authorized for the other Iowa-class battleships. So New Jersey does this, but she's the only active battleship anywhere in the world. So every time something pops up, she gets redeployed instead of returning home for her post-Shakedown availability. So she goes from the Philippines to Nicaragua to the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Lebanon, and all told, she spends 331 days at sea, traveling 76,000 nautical miles. All of this without having received all of the work that she was supposed to during her major overhaul. Plus, while being the prototype for the work that was going to be done on the other Iowa-class battleships. So by the time that they make it back to Long Beach, the crew had a tremendous list of things that needed to be modernized. This work took 6 months. Normally, it might have also included a dry docking period. However, all of this work was done pierside, and she wouldn't be dry docked again until 1987. So, what did that major work include? Significant accomplishments during New Jersey's post-Shakedown availability included the replacement of the center gun of Turret 2. It was found that the center barrel of Turret 2 had a crack in the rifling. I'm not sure if this happened at the end of Vietnam or if it happened during the early Shakedown trials when the ship was first being reactivated, but it meant that she deployed to Lebanon with only 8 functioning barrels. Center barrel Turret 2 was the one that was always used for ranging shots during the Vietnam War, and so it had significantly more use and wear than the other barrels. As the shell passes through the barrel, it forces the rifling out. And as the rifling escapes past the rest of the tube, it no longer has anything supporting it, so the shell passing past that rifling could cause it to crack. And if it cracks outside of the liner, it'll start to pass into the tube, and at that point, there's no salvaging the barrel. You have to pull the whole barrel out, bore out that rifling, and put in a new rifling. Obviously, this was not something the ship could do without a major yard period, and so she just goes out with 8 gun barrels. Well, she had them all on there. It's only 8 functioning, which is still 8 more functioning 16-inch gun barrels than any other ship anywhere in the world. So that's one of the major things that was accomplished at this time, and was the first time a battleship's gun barrels had been replaced, in the United States at least, since the mid-1950s. All of the enlisted crew member heads were refurbished. So this was one of the major things that was done during Vietnam as well. We've talked about it in a previous video, that Captain Snyder refurbished all of the heads so that they had porcelain commodes instead of stainless steel. That's one of the things you can count on with the Iowa-class battleships, really any ship that's receiving major updates. As the living conditions at home increase, the things that the sailors expect on ships also increases. The Navy is just a reflection of the larger society in general. Interestingly, we have reports from the mid-1990s when the Navy looked at reactivating these ships and what amount of work would need to go into it that also talk about the heads needing refurbishment. We don't know what the specific scope of work was during this 1984 yard period. However, some of the things that they looked at later on was increasing the number of towel racks and coat hangers for sailors to have for their towels and their clothes while they're in the shower. It included decreasing the number of commodes and showers per sailor, and other things like that that generally give the crew more space and means that they're sharing things with fewer people. Likely, we would have seen something similar to that in the 1980s that took it up to whatever the 80s habitability standards were, as opposed to the one in the 90s. In the engineering spaces, the reduction gears in 2 of the 4 main engines were reworked, including replacement of high and low speed pinions. So this was major work to the reduction gears, and it means that New Jersey could not have gotten up to her maximum speed during this time period prior to this. We know that the Iowa class suffered from vibration issues. This was probably exacerbated by the propeller shafts sitting on their bearings for the last 20 years since they had been last rotated. We know that Iowa had similar issues when she was reactivated, and her reactivation was similarly rushed and deferred stuff. And Captain Sequest of Iowa has reached out to us to tell us about some of the work that he did on that ship, and he and his crew did on that ship to shim those bearings to help with the vibration issue. Likely those vibration issues caused wider issues with the reduction gears that had to be repaired on this ship. So it's interesting to see just how much of her capabilities New Jersey originally deployed without. She wasn't able to attain her top speed. She didn't have her full main battery on board. Another modification at this time, 4 of the original 8 steam-driven lube oil pumps were replaced with electric motors, which included major modifications to the main lube oil piping system. So this may well have impacted the need to replace those pinions in the turbines as well. If they weren't cycling lube oil properly, that could have led to more wear than was allowable. With 2 lube oil pumps in each engine room, I'm not sure if they changed out 2 in 2 of the engine rooms and didn't have to modify the other 2 engine rooms, or if they swapped out 1 of the 2 in each of the 4 engine rooms. That's something I'll have to look into more when I go down below. It is interesting that they're adding more electrical systems, including missiles, more powerful radars, and now electric-driven lube oil pumps, but they're unable to improve the ship's electrical system. So the turbo generators that are making the electricity for the ship. That may be why they don't just replace all 8 with electric systems. Repair 3 was relocated to accommodate easier access during battle conditions. Repair 3 is the repair locker that is on second deck back aft, with 1 being for repair lockers on the main deck and 2 being second deck forward. The Navy is making a tremendous number of other changes to the superstructure, particularly the aft superstructure for the installation of the missiles, and that may well have impacted the ability to get to Repair 3 at its older location. So, it makes sense that they would move Repair 3 to be more accessible. It's interesting that this is referring to Repair 3 as 1 repair locker, while New Jersey actually has several Repair 3s. I'm not sure if it means that they relocated all of them, if they just relocated a main one, or if they weren't all installed yet by 1984, and some of them get added later on. 3rd CHT receiving station is installed. The CHT tanks were installed during Vietnam. That's where the sanitary water, like stuff from the toilets, gets held. Prior to Vietnam, it would have just been pumped right over the side of the ship. But now it's being held until either you're in international waters or you're tied up pierside and can plumb into a system like we use today to pump it into the city's sewer system. Interestingly, even with a much reduced crew than she would have had in Vietnam, they're producing enough sanitary water that they decided they needed to add additional tank capacity. This is likely one of the two tanks back aft. It was quite common during New Jersey's time off the coast of Lebanon that she would have to leave, I'm going to call it the firing line. It wasn't a firing line per se. She wasn't shooting her guns that frequently off Lebanon, but she left where she was doing her racetrack pattern within visible range of the coast to go out into international waters to empty her CHT tanks. So this seems like a modification that's going to allow the ship to stay on station for longer periods of time. This isn't like Vietnam, where there were a number of gun cruisers and battleships that could rotate through stations. The 4 Iowa-class battleships, of which likely only one is going to be active in either the Atlantic or the Pacific at any given time, are the only gunfire support ships, and so there's nobody that's going to relieve them. So keeping them on station longer makes sense. Topside handling modifications were fabricated to accommodate Tomahawk and Harpoon missile onloading while at anchor. I've always heard of this as being something that was done pierside, and I'm not sure if being at anchor means literally while the ship is anchored in a roadstead, or if it means while the ship is not underway, possibly pierside. However, you can see the gantry system mounted on the aft funnel, which isn't there throughout the ship's entire 80s career, and that is something that's added to facilitate reloading Harpoon missiles. It's quite possible that New Jersey deploys to Lebanon without any missiles on board. She certainly doesn't fire any. She does have some on board that she fires in training exercises during some of her Shakedown cruises. And so that's probably where they got the experience that reloading them is difficult. But interestingly, this is not from combat experience. And finally, the flight deck was reconfigured to accommodate additional types of helicopters. Helicopter approach was reoriented to a direct astern approach. When New Jersey was first reactivated, helicopters were coming in diagonally, and that proved to be extremely difficult. It also limited the size of the helicopters that could land on the ship. This is probably from direct experience off Lebanon, especially since the ship is deployed for so long, 331 days. This is the longest that any ship since World War II has been forward deployed, even to this day. And so one of the things that they did later on during that deployment was starting to rotate out crew members by flying on reservists to replace them. Limiting the size of helicopters limited how much they could rearm the ship and how quickly they could move crew members on and off. And so the Navy decided that the flight deck facilities were not easy to use and were not capable of carrying all the helicopters that they wanted to use with these ships. So that is from direct experience. So which of these modifications do you think was the most important? Do you think they were worthwhile at all? Keep in mind it's taking the Pacific Fleet's only operational battleship out of service for 6 months. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below for ways you can donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.